Globally, the statistics are pretty harrowing. 90% of folks who could benefit from treatment simply don't have access to it. And Uganda is no different.
The numbers that are not captured are alarming. Death by suicide, 7 or 10 are not captured. The reason is even some of the lowest police posts not resourced. So that means the data they capture do not get digitalized. And the situation in refugee settlement, it's alarming because of the US aid cut, the funding that has been cut. It's causing more anxiety and suicidal tendencies because you find a mother with 6 children and she can't feed them.
Finemind exists to make mental health a routine part of primary care. We're not necessarily introducing a new cadre of worker. We're using the existing capacities, the existing personnel who are already providing care, and we're essentially trying to upskill, kind of armor them, give them an additional tool in their tool belt. So as they're providing general health services, they're also able to provide some semblance of mental health services as well.
Welcome to Mind the Gap, a podcast about what's missing in global mental health.
I'm Christy Savetta.
I'm Chris Underhill.
And we're here to explore the stories, solutions, and systems shaping mental health around the world.
From community champions to global change makers.
Let's dive into what's working and what's not.
And what it'll take to close the gap. Welcome back to Mind the Gap. We are joined today by Pavel Reppo and David Oyet, the co-founders of Finemind. David and Pavel, warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
It's really a pleasure having you both with us today. We're really excited to dive in. And I think the best way to do that is to start at the beginning. You know, when we were talking a little bit about this podcast, what we might want to talk about. Pavel, you mentioned, you guys didn't really start with a blueprint with Finemind. You started with an email in terms of how you and David got connected. So can you take us back to that moment and, what made you say yes to building something together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually 2 emails. I left a single email out. I'll back up a little bit, but try and kind of keep it brief as well. I had come back from Toronto, was working for Engineers Without Borders, Canada, came home and was like, what's next? And I've always felt a deep passion for mental health, my own struggles with mental illness and so forth. And digging a little bit deeper into the Google, Dr. Google, I was kind of mystified by the global mental health landscape and how so little was being done to bridge the treatment gap. That search brought me to Vikram Patel. I decided to send him an email. Now, I've never met Vikram, nor has he met me, but I sent him an email, just extremely excited, and said, I would love to Skype you. I think at that point it was a Skype. And he wrote me back in about 3 hours, and we eventually did jump on a call. He was running a leadership and mental health course annually, mentioned that to me, and I ended up going. I raised some money through crowdfunding, ended up going to the course, and I remember him looking at me and being like, Pavel, you're here. It's good to see you. And I said, yes, I am. I'm excited to be here. And that was kind of the genesis of Finemind is. I came home and we adapted the Manas model that was incredibly influential and Vikram was involved in. And that kind of germinated an organization called Mindful We. Now, before Finemind ever existed, that was the current iteration. And we were working in a small suburb, Kampala. And we were trying to get things going, liaising with Clark International University, trying to get a short certificate or short course program up and running. And that's where David enters. David at that point was the short courses coordinator, and their dean was a little sluggish in getting back to me, but David wasn't. David, I think this is a good segue to you.
Yes, it's interesting because the story of Finemind, from where Pavel started from, matched up with my interest in trying to build something for my community. So while I was working at Clark International University, I was particularly interested in things that I can do back home in the community of Northern Uganda, where I come from. Now, those who are familiar with the story of Northern Uganda, you get to know that it had a long civil war that lasted more than 20 years. Yeah. And I happened to be part of the story of those children that were affected by the war. But I was privileged enough to have moved to an orphanage in Kampala, where I got an education and ultimately secured a job at Clark International University, where I actually did my university training from. While at Clark International University, I was working on promoting short professional trainings, the short courses, and on also doing a bit of marketing. So I would interact with my peers and staff members during lunch hours and tell them stories about my community and the kind of help that people need. So everybody, almost 80 to 90% of staff members at the university knew where my interest lies, and they knew exactly what I wanted to do for my community in northern Uganda. I was sitting there responding to student emails and random emails, and my colleague, who was a university counselor and also a lecturer of clinical psychology, forwarded an email that was stuck in their inbox from Pavel to me and said, David, this speaks to the things that you like. You could take this and turn it around and be useful for your community. I looked at that email, indeed read through it like 3 times. I saw something that was equally good for a new short course at the university, but much more impactful if taken to the community, especially the broken community where I come from. I called Maurice, by that time, the university counselor who had forwarded the email, and asked a bit more question about that particular email because I needed to reply to it. Maurice told me, no worries, just take that email and do whatever you want to do with it. I was quite careful about conflicting with my job and taking a potential thing that had come in for the university and trying to do something else with it outside my job. But once I got the clearance to respond to the email and do whatever I wish with it, I reached out to Pavel and told him this is great for short course, but it could be more impactful if taken to the community. And Pavel didn't know much about the situation in northern Uganda. He had stories of trauma. He was well informed about post-conflict communities, refugee communities, urban refugees, and people living in suburbs. That's where he was doing his research in Kampala. So he had an idea of what I was talking about, but he didn't want to take the challenge. And his deepest fear was how to do it, funding and the team. That was his deepest fear. But we scheduled 2 or 3 more Zoom calls, talked about it. We agreed to run a pilot phase in the community. No money again for it. Through his usual skills of crowdfunding and crowd fundraising, like he did when he was going to India for that mental health leadership course. He tried this again, and he raised quite a bit of money, which I like saying he sent to a stranger, because this is somebody that was just exchanging email with him and having a few Zoom calls, and there he was sending more than $3,000 for what we would call a study phase to see if the program would be feasible in the community. But to say that was still mindful we, and mindful we then later on, after our initial phase in the north, the study phase in the north, graduated into what we call the present day Finemind. So Finemind is a story of 2 people with lived experience who literally looked for each other through magical email exchanges and agreed to do something when one partner is living thousands and thousands of kilometers out of Africa. So that's where we got as Finemind. And to date, we've done quite incredible work.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're going to get on to the incredible work pretty soon. But that is an incredible story. I agree with you, absolutely. And David, what does it mean to build an organization, in this case, a mental health organization, from the inside out, as it were? Because in a way, we also need to not only start with the story of the emails and the story of the communication that went between the 2 of you, but also with your own story. Am I right?
Yes.
Give us a little more on that.
It's not easy to start an organization, especially targeting mental health, because mental health is a struggle that we do not see physically with our naked eyes. At the point when you start recognizing it with your naked eyes, that means the patient or the person affected has reached a certain adverse stage that needs more advanced assistance. But before that, there are people who are struggling every day with different conditions, anxiety, depression, and you will not see with your naked eyes. And you see someone reporting to work, you see someone neatly dressed up, you see someone on the steering, they could be struggling. So starting an organization to address a need that you cannot see with your naked eye is not easy. And convincing people and funders that people are struggling is not going to be easy for anyone because they feel like if you're going through something, then that's your problem. And as a human being or as an adult, they expect you to get your things together, which really is not easy. And blending with my story, a person who has gone through personal struggles, witnessing violence, and struggling to heal through it. Somebody who has been on the street looking for food, somebody who has survived through an orphanage, somebody who has survived through scholarships to study, having almost nowhere to go for bed in the night, even if you had an education during daytime. It's not easy to convince yourself that you can build something as big as an organization that's called Finemind today, if you're starting from zero, especially a story of a young person in a very disadvantaged economy like Uganda, where fundraising is not easy, even if you hosted an event, especially fundraising for a topic like mental health. So blending in my own insecurities, my own lack of confidence in myself by that time, given my background, self-pity and what I've gone through, it wasn't easy to convince that you can actually initiate that conversation with someone far away in an economy like the US, for example, Pavel. So this really also made it very difficult. Away from that, even trust. People who are struggling in this part of the world and people who almost have little are less trusted with resources, especially if the person you're talking to hasn't understood you, because you come from a desperation background. And here you're talking about elevating others who are equally struggling. So my story, my conditions, in my own situation couldn't make it possible to think of starting an organization like this. But the most interesting thing, of course, is that my story was possible because I met equally someone who is on the other side of the world who knew how to tap onto resources from that side of the world. And so that access started boosting my confidence one step after another. For example, the first inflow of money that came in through Western Union, the confidence to pick that money and to think that I can do something important out of it. And then the second of registration, a bank account, the next inflow of cash, and then my confidence and my level of trust that I can actually do this started increasing. The annual visits by my colleague, the co-founder, to come and spend a month and some days every year with me in the community. And also the kind of trust that we started gaining from the community at least enabled me to do this. But I can tell you, Chris, that so many of us live with so much self-pity that it's not so easy to say that you can start an organization and gain the level of trust that we have built the last 5 years.
So it's really, I mean, your stories together, I mean, they're incredible just in the sense of these two people who are looking to make that change and make those choices and make that difference. And you found each other in very unlikely circumstances around an email, bit of like a fate kind of interweaving, interplaying, together found that space, that confidence, those areas, the need set. You've come together to really form a very complete picture of a strong basis to start something. And it's a real story of both that and the building of Finemind, but it sounds like also, David, in many ways, and maybe for you, Pavel, as well, the building of the confidence to do that and to really do the incredible work that you guys are doing, which I'm excited to dive into a little bit. Before we do, I have a quick kind of side question for you guys. Pavel, you mentioned the treatment gap, and David, you mentioned kind of within your own story, not necessarily having the resources to be able to look at or treat things that aren't visible necessarily. Just for our listeners as well, could you just give us like a very brief overview? What is the treatment gap? And then we'll dive in a little bit more to Finemind.
I'll touch on it briefly. I think globally, the statistics are pretty harrowing. That's about a 90% treatment gap, indicating that about 90% of folks who could benefit from treatment simply don't have access to it. And Uganda is no different. The conservative estimates estimate that the country struggles with depression at about a 35% clip. I would say that is a vast underestimate because most individuals simply don't even know that they're struggling with depression because no one has asked them, nor do they know resources that can provide or services that can kind of aid them on this journey. Uganda also has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. If I recall, lastly, maybe it was 8th in the world. Those are just some statistics, but David kind of has the pulse or the finger on the ground of what's actually happening. Maybe you can kind of lend a little bit more credibility to that.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, Pavel, about the treatment gap. But it's also good to know that the statistics that is not captured is quite way more. And maybe instead of 8 could be 4th if all the statistics were captured.
Right.
Because we have a vast majority of the population that are living far away from government health facilities or even the legal systems. Most of the statistics are captured the government legal system. Let's say the local police station would capture such data and then later digitalize it. The other is the local health facilities. They would capture such data and send it to the government digital systems. And through, I think that the researchers and the world reports are generated according to each government captured data. So the numbers that are not captured are alarming. For example, we have death and we have birth that are not recorded, especially those that give birth far away from the government centers. And so death caused through suicide or death by suicide, you may find 7 or 10 are not captured. The reason is even some of the lowest police posts are not resourced. So that means the data they capture do not get digitalized. And the trend here is that very few people think about postmortem. I mean, the illiterate community would not think about taking someone for postmortem. They look at it as a burden because it has an extra finances attached to it, transporting the body to a government facility for postmortem, which then data would be captured and reason for death would be captured. The people don't do that, and they rush to bury instead. So those are challenges. There's so many silent data that is not captured. And the situation, especially now in refugee settlement, it's alarming because of the US aid cut, the funding that has been cut, and this is stemming from food rationing. So refugees have low and actually less access to food, and it's causing more anxiety and suicidal tendencies because you find a mother with 6 children and she can't feed them. So that's what I would say about the current treatment gap and data that is not captured for suicidal tendencies. Yes. So listening to that, it actually makes the treatment gap even wider because very few people have access to services. And Finemind is trying to scale those services to the low resource communities, at the lower level of the public health infrastructure, which you would call the primary health care, initial primary health care at the health center 2 and health center 1 level. That's where Finemind is trying to concentrate.
Right. Thanks for the broad overview of the treatment gap there, both from a global level, but also more deeply in terms of the reality of the country context with Uganda as well. And David, you started to get into it a little bit. I'd love to hear, if you guys could share a little bit more about, how do you guys close the treatment gap at a Finemind? What does it look like in terms of the delivery? What makes it work? And David, I know you mentioned this already, but I'd be curious as well for you to talk a bit about some of this, this invisible data that's happening and how that plays into the work that you do.
We work within the existing government health infrastructure. That has always been a cornerstone of our work and something that we're going to continue to do. Finemind exists to make mental health a routine part of primary care. In order for us to do that, we kind of need to infiltrate those existing health facilities. So we're not necessarily introducing a new cadre of worker. We're using the existing capacities, the existing personnel who are already providing care. And we're essentially trying to upskill, kind of armor them, give them an additional tool in their tool belt. So as they're providing general health services, they're also able to provide some semblance of mental health services as well. We offer what we call a stepped care approach, and maybe that's kind of a part of our sweet sauce or what we do differently. I fundamentally believe that health isn't a one size fits all. Mental health kind of follows suit in that. With our step care approach, prior to kind of engaging in any sort of treatment, it's critical that we understand the symptomology. That requires that we assess, that we get a baseline of how folks are faring. If folks score kind of a moderate to above depressive symptomology, at that point, we invite them to start at the very first step, which is called interpersonal counseling. Now, maybe some of our audience might be familiar with a group interpersonal psychotherapy, which has incredible roots in Uganda, incredible success. It's more of a pared down version that you're able to provide one-on-one counseling. You still look at the same problem-based areas. We're looking at grief, interpersonal conflict of any sort, kind of a life change that you're engaging, and then kind of the last catchment area is more loneliness or social isolation. Above that, if someone is maybe not improving by way of IPC, interpersonal counseling, or they score high at that initial intake, we enroll them in Problem Management Plus. This is a relatively new type of treatment that was developed by the World Health Organization, still focusing on depression. He was trying to kind of wrap into that adversity. And this is a manualized, evidence-based treatment, typically involving about 5 sessions, excluding the pre and the post. And then above that, folks are really struggling, more of those kind of complex and refractory clients that have high suicidality. We're lucky that we have a referral arm. Now, to David's point, we're working in settings that don't have necessarily built out infrastructure. Where David comes from, Agago district, way up north, almost as far north as you hit South Sudan. It's about a 9-hour drive on a good day. The mental health infrastructure is lackluster. We're grateful that we have a psychiatric nurse on our staff that we're able to refer folks to. So she's kind of our initial gateway. Beyond that, Peace, her name is Peace. If she's not able to provide the proper services, we have a hospital in place that we're also able to refer. So this stepped care approach is something that we kind of hold our feet to, and we're excited because it seems that the movement engaging these health facilities has been really proven to be effective in our regard. David, anything to add? Maybe you could talk a little bit about the awareness campaigns, the community kind of involvement. I think those are all critical ingredients to the delicious soup that we build.
The awareness campaign is key to unlocking the benefits of counseling to the community. When we first stepped foot in 2019 with our initial research in that part of the country, trust me, even me, mental health wasn't a language I could understand. So I did not know how to directly translate it into my local dialect. So we didn't talk about it. That's why there were very little phrases or words to describe what depression meant. And so there were no definitions for depression, anxiety, epilepsy, things like that were not talked about openly. So the awareness campaign is to open the minds of people to what mental health is, describing what it is, describing what causes depression and how someone can cope with depression, which services are available in the community. To this case, counseling that is provided by Finemind, where it is located, and also to take that opportunity to answer people's concerns and questions. And we do this through radio programming, and we also do community meetings or home visits. But mostly, community meetings are where we get to interact with members of the community to help to redefine our work, but also to get ideas on how best we can serve them. But when you talk about how we're bridging the gap, which Pavel was actually telling you, that we work through the government infrastructure, the government structures, you'll be interested to know that the initial point of contact for health service by the government is the health center one, which many in Uganda call the village health team. So this is actually not a physical building. This is not a hospital. This is not even a tree shed. This is a human being, a person equipped with a handbag that has some assorted painkillers and a few anti-malarials. So it's a human being who lives at their house or their hut, grassroots hut. And so that is now the first initial health center. And you find that that health center could be at a village far away from physical building where there is actually a nurse and a clinical officer. So we bridge the gap by equipping some of these VHTs, who are far away from the physical health facilities. And then we also equipped a nurse at the health center too, where there's an actual building and preferably a bed and a nurse and a midwife. So we equip these people to be able to provide a step care approach like the one Pavel described earlier here. And that is how we are bridging the mental gap, because previously things like depression wouldn't be addressed at Health Center 1 or Health Center 2. Nobody would pay attention to something like that.
So really, I mean, the approach that you're describing is, an incredibly comprehensive, integrated approach, which actually has foundations in a relatively simple model in the sense of like this stepped care approach, but within the primary healthcare system itself. So not rebuilding things necessarily or introducing new apps or tools or things like that, but you're really saying within what exists, how do we kind of weave in mental health in order to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible with a lens, I imagine, towards things like sustainability. And I just have a really quick follow-up, and I wouldn't, I'd love it if you guys could just share like a few minute thought on, that question around data and reports, right? Where you don't necessarily have a big picture on the treatment gap necessarily in Uganda because of the lack of data. With the work that you're doing now, can you just for like a minute or so just riff a little bit on what you're doing to help kind of close that element of the gap, right? Because data informs policy anyway. So what does that look like in terms of your approach?
We collect a boatload of data for Finemind, for external partners and funders, and for us just to kind of validate, are we doing what we're claiming to do? But I think one of the key pieces of our work, and Chris, you're kind of touching on this, is that the Ministry of Health also needs to know what the current status of mental health conditions are in their surrounding districts. And when you would ask the assistant commissioner, what is the mental health incidence, she would kind of look blankly at the audience and say, we simply don't know. So I think that really kind of prompted us to take a deeper look as to how can we feed this particular data so the Ministry of Health is also receiving it. And that was a little bit of a quagmire, if you will, and engaging data clerks at every single health facility, engaging the district biostatistician, because they're kind of the technical lead in this. But at the moment, we have 5 health facilities that we are now consistently every single month reporting back to what they call the DHIS2 system, District Health Information System. So now every single month, the Ministry of Health is able to at least ascertain by way of our work what the mental health or the depression incidence is. We're expanding that. An additional 5 health facilities is coming on board in Agago district. And in any district that Finemind continues to expand, this is going to become a cornerstone of our work, because arguably, as much as we're collecting data for ourselves, if Uganda as a whole doesn't have those numbers, they can't effectively advocate and petition for funds to really elevate and affect policy for the country at large.
Got it. That's really helpful. Really helpful to hear that overview.
David, did you want to comment on that, or because otherwise I'm going to ask you another question.
No, Pavel clearly answered that. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. David, I wanted to ask you a question which, as you know, I've been involved in the delivery of mental health programs over many years. And I sometimes worry that a program which is focused on a particular condition, in this case depression, is going to miss out on the support and treatment of folk who have other mental health conditions, anxiety disorder, or one of the serious conditions such as schizophrenia or bipolar. And whilst of course I recognize completely that those are much smaller numbers in terms of population, nevertheless I have an anxiety that they may not get treated, and get missed out in the process. How do you deal with that? What happens in reality when your facilitators are on the ground and they're talking to the the local staff, whether it's at that village level or the level above? How does it work?
So, since we're a community mental health organization, and we are not highly resourced to do everything, we've equipped ourselves with knowledge of our referral pathways, so we know where to refer what we cannot afford to handle. And so we do refer most of the cases that we cannot handle with immediate effect. For example, cases to do with epilepsy and bipolar, we can either recommend, we can actually refer them to other organizations that are doing that, or an immediate government facility that can provide effective treatment. Hopefully, if Finemind is at some point in the near future manages to convince the government about funding for mental health, then the resources to provide mental services will be enough if it's in the hands of the government. We hope for that.
Thinking a little bit about that as well. I mean, thanks for bringing up the idea of funding, David. As in this context, as we know, the funding gap in mental health is big and it's large, and it is very real. And I'm curious. I mean, you guys have done so well in terms of your organization, where you've gotten to, and we've talked a lot about the treatment gap, especially in Uganda. But I'm curious, if I ask you something like, what might happen if Finemind stopped operations tomorrow? What are some of the first couple of things that come to your mind in terms of what would be lost? And I like thinking sometimes about outcomes and impact in this counterfactual lens, because I think for some folks it helps really ground the idea of the importance of the work that you're doing. So I'm curious, what are one or two things that comes to mind? What might be lost?
Christy, that is a very interesting question. First of all, and most importantly, I am doing Finemind's job as a full-time job right now. So before I was having two jobs, the university job and Finemind. Now it's a full-time job. So if we have to lose funding, the first thing that I don't want to shy away from saying is that I'll lose my job. Number one. I'll equally need to see a therapist after that.
True.
Yeah, but on a more pressing note, because I have a degree and I have built a network and I've diversified my mindset towards what income means, and I do a bit of other private things outside Finemind to raise money. Losing that job wouldn't be of a big blow to me, but it's going to be of a terrible blow to the community, because as David, it's just me, and I can manage to carve my situations around and change my situation and have an alternative income. But there's a mother who has nothing, no education, no shop, no business, no nothing, and is struggling to raise the children. The apparently divorced, and so she's handling relationship issues, she's handling economic issues, and she's left with no help. And that is a mother that Finemind helps right now. That's the type of person that Finemind helps right now in the community. There could be a young man who is left alone with no property to inherit, no parents, and growing up as an orphan, 13, 15, 17, 18, 19-year-old. That's the 19-year-old Finemind is talking to. Finemind is helping them rediscover their purpose. Finemind is helping them to restore their dignity right now. If we have zero funding and this program is to close up, these people are going to be helped. They're going to be helpless. There are thousands of these examples. There's a single mother, there's a single father, there's somebody who is severely distressed, and somebody who is almost tending towards suicidal behaviors. And these are the people that Finemind are helping. Finemind is helping people to unlock their potential through resetting their mind using its step care approach of therapy. The interpersonal counseling has been very impactful, according to our preliminary randomized controlled trial research that we did. And we have testimonies, live testimonies of people walking through the doors of Finemind offices and talking about how the therapy has turned their lives around. So these are the people that are going to miss out. And it's more than David. These are thousands of people. So we're moving into refugee settlement right now. People who are alienated from their land. They're in Uganda for the first time in a foreign land, helpless, hopeless. And we're trying to restore that hope by creating conversations. We're trying to restore that hope through awareness, games, having them play with one another. These are people that are going to severely miss out, and there are a million more others in other parts of the world. That's the biggest challenge.
I think you've described it very well. Pavel, anything to add to that?
I'll say two quick things. Every year we host a large event for World Mental Health Celebration Day. We attract 1,000 people to attend with music, skits, drama. This last year, we had the local stakeholders, local district officials attend. And amidst the incredible community and joy, one of those individuals came up and shared publicly to the crowd that because of our work, they're going to petition the national government to see more psychiatric nurses come to the district. It was a little bit of a kind of a quick delivery. And I don't know if the community quite heard the significance, but to us, to me, who's been kind of, slowly fighting the good fight with the work that we're doing, it was an incredible success. And to see Finemind leave, that type of energy, that type of momentum, I think certainly would also halt. And then kind of in closing in this particular point, it's taken us many years, a lot of steps walked to build the trust and to really reinforce this growing belief that mental health matters, whether in humanitarian settings, whether in communal settings. And that's not done overnight. That takes countless conversations and incredible aptitude and resilience. And to me, that would be a tremendous loss. If Finemind, or frankly any organization, was to leave, that trust, that momentum, that growing belief, again, that mental health is important and deserves its time of day.
That's well, the answer from both, the answer to those questions from both of you are very impressive, I think. And as we come to the end of this recording, and goodness me, the time has gone fast, hasn't it?
It has.
And there is, we could have easily done all the session all over again, and we would still have time. But it occurs to me, just in my contribution to the wrap up, it occurs to me that this is a small to medium-sized organization, which sometimes, of course, is going to be a little rough at the edges, right? Because you're working in difficult terrain, and you're working with quite small amounts of money sometimes, and there are a lot of other people competing for those mental health dollars now, and of course, as we know, several major resources have gone out of the health funding field, including mental health funding field, and so everybody, including you, are scrabbling for money more than ever. And yet you continue the work, and that is, of course, immensely impressive. And you can continue the commitment to work alongside and with government colleagues, because if ever there was a case for sustainability, it is working alongside, government colleagues. Because, God forbid, but if you had to stop working at some point in the future to take Christie's counterintuitive or countercultural idea to its logical conclusion, if you had to stop, then at least you would have the satisfaction of knowing that everything that you had done up to then was embedded in the government system, and those people had, taken it on with considerable seriousness, I'm quite sure. So I just want to, from my point of view, just say thank you very much indeed. I think it's been a really fantastic session, and lovely that we opened with the iconic Vikram Patel, which was a great way of getting started. And I'll just hand over now to Christy to finish off the session. Thank you so much, both of you there.
Bringing us back to the beginning there as well, Chris. I mean, one of the big things that stood out to me was this idea of like unlocking individuals' potential. And it comes back to me as well in terms of the stories that you both shared in terms of your own founding story of Finemind. unlocking your own potential in many ways to create this incredible organization. So for you two, but also for those who need it, right? Supporting people who are the most missed out and making them and their stories visible to individuals who can help them, but also to governments in terms of data. That's a very important piece, and we touched on that, right? In terms of understanding the scope of the problem and therefore the scope of the required solution. So that really stood out quite a lot, as well as that those 3 points you made at the end there, Pavel, in terms of the momentum, the growing momentum you have, the trust you've built, and this incredible growing belief that mental health matters. So you've really reminded us very much and shared your story in a way. It's scaling mental health isn't always about the next big program, the next big thing, or the shiny, flashiest thing. It's about making really good care like ordinary and expected and part of the systems that people rely on. Right. So you have that trust and the momentum is there and it's clear. And I appreciate you guys sharing your story of how you got there. That kind of different kind of leadership, one that listens first, stays close to the people who they're trying to serve in as many ways as possible. And the leadership that doesn't wait for perfect conditions to begin the journey. So thank you very much both for the story and for the time today. It's been a real pleasure. And as Chris said, I have 15 more questions, so I'm sure we'll see you back on the podcast again at some point soon. Thank you both.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you.